A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
It has been a significant week this week, and one of those things that's made it quite significant is the remembering of D-Day, that on the 6th of June, 80 years ago, young men, and some of those just teenagers, hit the beaches of Normandy in France to stop the Nazis. British, Americans, even Australians, along with Canadians, Kiwis, as well as youthful soldiers from places like France, Holland, Norway and Poland, were all involved in seeking to defeat Hitler and liberate Europe. It is a commemoration. It is something that we can look back on and say that will have some level of great effect on the world and the way we think about the value of peacetime. Well, Bill Muehlenberg's been reflecting on remembering D-Day, but asking an interesting question. Was it all in vain? Hello, Bill Muehlenberg. Welcome back.
Thanks again. Always great to be here.
Bill, when you're reflecting on D-Day, this is one of those significant times in the history of the world, not just the 20th century, but there are all sorts of lessons to be learned. How do you begin to reflect on the value of those young men who lost their lives on those beaches at Normandy?
Yeah, well, I certainly do think it was not in vain, obviously, what we did 80 years ago, but some broad themes we can probably tease out as we go along. One, of course, a big part of this was stopping the Nazis from their, genocide against the Jews. And of course, just now, right, the last year or so, we're again wondering what's happening in the West. Anti-Semitism is on the rise, and there's all these protests against the Jews. So in that sense, it's certainly quite relevant. But I guess the other broad theme I look at in some recent pieces is the whole idea, are most Australians and Westerners really willing to fight for anything, right? Do they have a sense of duty? Do they have a sense of patriotism? Do they have love of country? Would they be willing to go to war for anything? Or have we had such a, indoctrination into, toxic masculinity and how war is, good for nothing, never solves anything, and it's not worth fighting, and we shouldn't really love our country anymore. So all these things have been going through in my head as, I look back 80 years ago, and we had, some of them were, right? Teenagers. You look at their pictures of their faces, they look like 16, 17-year-old kids who volunteered to go overseas to, stand up for freedom. So I think we have a lot of questions we can ask in today's culture.
Of course, around the time of D-Day, that was a time of international crisis, and people rose to the occasion to be able to combat the evil of Nazism. So when you have peacetime, all of these woke issues have an opportunity to flourish. Is that where you think we might be? Because here in Australia, we certainly haven't been facing wartime crisis, and the fact that wokeism has grown so substantially, that might indicate that crisis actually brings out the best of us, but in other times, it brings out the worst.
Yeah. Well, look, we may be in a time of peace here in Australia, but in a sense, to talk about international crises, well, it seems to me they're still going on aplenty, right? Political Islam is still a very real threat. As we said, the radical rise of anti-Semitism is a threat. You can look at geopolitics, right? Russia getting in bed with communist China and Iran, kind of forming their own little alignment there. That's a real worry. So it's not just Ukraine and what's happening there. I would think at any time we could see, really big things breaking out. So it's not just me. I believe the Shadow Defense Minister Andrew Hastie just a few days ago actually wrote a piece on the same issue. Are we prepared for a war? Are we ready, certainly in terms of military capability, to defend Australia if push came to shove? And he was quite concerned that we weren't. And like I say, because of ideological reasons, the woke agenda, political correctness, I worry as well whether whether Australians would have the guts, the heart, the conviction, the beliefs to defend the country if it came to that. And simply the fact that so much of our military today, right? They're more concerned about what's your pronoun, what is your gender, than, turning young men into a fit fighting force. So on a lot of fronts, I think it's kind of scary times, and certainly different from what we saw 80 years ago.
Most of the debate we might see in the media is around Australia's preparedness by way of our hardware. I mean, we're talking submarines and missile defence and all sorts of things that are about the equipment that we might use to fight a war. But the character of the personnel, this is what I pick up that you're talking about and getting into some conversation in this article, because are we preparing a younger generation to be able to defend the freedoms that we have enjoyed? Is this, do you think, part of the issue here?
Yeah, well, a big part of it, as you say, character of those around. Again, if you've been taught in school and media and by politicians and the elites for decades now that, Australia is a racist, sexist, imperialistic country, we're evil, when you really teach young people to hate their own country, which is happening all over the West, you're not going to get a lot of people putting their hands up and say, hey, I want to defend Australia. A lot of them are saying Australia probably deserves to be attacked. So that's the one problem. And the other is simply, numbers. People enlisting. Numbers are way down, right? In the past, a lot of people regularly did sign up for the ADF, for the military. Today, the numbers are shrinking big time, and the Albanese government just in the last few weeks has come out with a couple of proposals. One, saying they would waive a lot of requirements to enter the military, including various health requirements. That's one concession or compromise. And then just the other day, I saw they're now saying, we can maybe allow non-Australian citizens to join the military. So whether that might just mean a Kiwi who's lived here for 10 years, but, where do you draw the line there? We had worries in the Second World War about, Japanese living in America. What do you do about them when Japan has attacked America? So questions arise here as well. If you start allowing people from other countries to serve, will some of them at some point maybe turn against the host nation? So there's a lot of kind of issues here. The woke agenda, the lack of volunteers, the teaching that Australia is a horrible nation anyway, so why bother defending it? Put all this together, and I think it's a bit of a worrying time if something were to happen. Whatever, Indonesia coming down from the north. So, whatever, it's a concern, something we got to think about.
We can read between the lines when we see that a carrot has to be dangled to hasten the opportunity towards citizenship for people not yet citizens to join our Australian Defence Forces to defend a nation, when we might hope that those young men and women who love our nation would rise to do that. So this comes to that point that you're making here, Bill. Is this a place where we are just not prepared because Australia isn't worth fighting for?
Well, again, if you get that beaten into your head over decades, just how bad Australia is, we got a horrible past, a horrible history, we're still a horrible nation, and, again, it's not just Australia, right? America, England, New Zealand, all over the West, you have this same anti-Western mindset being pushed repeatedly, not just in universities, but you're getting it now even in primary schools. I think I just saw the other day on Sky News primary school, every morning the school kids have to get up and sing a song about anti-white children, how bad whites are. And this is in a primary school. So when you get that kind of stuff happening all over the place, who's going to stand up and fight if Australia did come under attack? So this is a part of the bigger issue that we've talked about so often, right? the woke agenda, identity politics, the I hate the West mindset that used to be part of a fringe minority in the 60s, right, when I was a part of it, but now has become mainstream in far too many places. And it's a worry, is anybody going to stand up and say, hey, Australia is worth fighting for? Democracy, freedom, rule of law, these are great social goods. And 80 years ago, we sent our best young men over to, foreign shores to shed blood to protect freedom and democracy. Would we be willing to do it again? And that's a serious question.
How can we apply our Christian understanding of what it is to honour God and honour the nation that you serve? Was there something, Bill, that marked the D-Day soldiers, something in their character, their ability to follow leadership, their aspiration to defeat evil? Is there something Christian, do you think, that from around that time, 80 years ago, that those young men were rising to that was bigger than just a secularized nothingness?
Yeah, well, look, there certainly would have been far more Christians in general in the West 80 years ago, including in the military. So a lot of these young boys would have been Christians. And as you say, yeah, certain values that are good not just for Christians, but for societies, courage, chivalry, heroism, the idea we should stand up for what's right, whether it's defending a damsel in distress, right, the knight in shining armor kind of picture, whether it's defending your wife and kids on a private level, or defending them more broadly on a national level. Again, patriotism has gone out the window for many. Sure, you can be a Christian and transcend any one country, but I think it's not antithetical to say you love Jesus and, you might love the country that you live in. You're proud to be an Australian. You're proud to be an American. And you can be a Christian and, love both. Certainly God comes first. But to want to protect a nation when it comes under attack, it's not a contradiction. So, yeah, it's, again, part of the bigger malaise, right? As we lose on Christianity, become more secular, well, everything follows suit.
I guess the pride we have in our country comes down to the pride we have in our country's values. And if wokeism and all of those different dimensions are taking over, and that's actually delivering us from having a level of pride in the values of our country, that doesn't look good for our future, does it? So understanding what those Christian values are, as you talked about bravery and courage and chivalry, all those things that we can see that come from a Christian foundation, those things need to be worked on. We can't lose those in our own families, in our own communities.
Yeah, right. So we go back to our churches, right? Instead of joining the world and talking about toxic masculinity and all that, why not talk about the great values that Christianity has always upheld, right? You read the Hall of Faith chapter, Hebrews 11, and all the brave and courageous things these men and women of God did in the past. Nothing wrong with honoring and celebrating bravery and courage and self-sacrifice for the good, not just for the good of the Lord, but sometimes for the good of family or nation. So, yeah, a lot of things we need to relearn because we're getting a lot of bad rap in education, media, and so on. So, as always, the Christian has to think more carefully and resist the drift of the world.
Well, for listeners, you might want to read some more about what Bill has written about D-Day. Of course, it was on June 6th, 80 years ago, that the beaches of Normandy were stormed to stop the Nazis. Remembering D-Day, was it all in vain? You'll be able to find the article that we're talking about today that Bill has written at billmuehlenberg.com, or you can simply Google Culture Watch, one word. Bill, thanks so much for another great update today on 2020.
Thanks again, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.